All right, let's dive into this Renaissance thing. You sent over all this stuff, articles, notes, all about the Renaissance. So
Yeah.
let's see if we can pull out the good stuff,
Yeah.
help you really get what this whole era did for art and science and
And
yeah, and even how we think today.
it's pretty amazing how much it shaped the world. It's like a bridge between
Between,
the medieval world and what we think of as modern times.
yeah, right? It's like we always hear rebirth, but that doesn't.
It's not just a simple restart button, yeah.
Exactly. There's got to be more to it, right? It wasn't just going back to those old Greek and Roman ideas, was it?
No, not just a copy-paste job. It's more like they took those ideas and used them.
Like a jumping off point.
Totally, like a springboard for a whole new way of seeing the world.
So, humanism, that seems to be a big deal in all our sources. Was it really as simple as hey, humans are awesome?
Well, yeah, there was a definite shift in mindset. Instead of
Yeah.
focusing solely on religion, you start to see this emphasis on human potential, what we can achieve, reason, ethics.
So, what makes us human? Both good and bad.
Absolutely. Art, philosophy, everything starts exploring that question.
Fascinating. But why did it all kick off in Florence? What made it the Renaissance HQ?
Well, Florence was already a hub for trade, wealthy. Plus, you had families like the Medici.
The Medici, they were
They were like the venture capitalists of the Renaissance, really. They poured money into the arts, supported thinkers, scientists.
so patronage was the key ingredient.
It definitely fueled the fire.
Yeah.
But there were a couple of other big events that shook things up. First, Constantinople falls in 1453.
Wow, yeah. That's huge, but how did
It wasn't just a political upheaval. Think about it. All these Greek scholars.
they had to go somewhere?
Exactly. They fled to Italy, bringing tons of ancient texts with them, stuff that had been preserved in the Byzantine Empire.
So it's like a knowledge bomb went off.
Yeah. And then boom, Gutenberg's printing press hits the scene around 1440.
Now that's what I call a game changer, like the internet of its time.
Right. Ideas could suddenly be mass-produced, spread to a much wider audience.
Okay, so let me get this straight. Humanism sets the scene. Florence has the money and the brains. Constantinople falls and unleashes all these ancient texts. And then the printing press blows it all up.
Yeah, you got it. And this sets the stage for an explosion of creativity, especially in art.
Like those techniques that made Renaissance art so different, right?
Exactly. I mean, it's not just about making things look realistic. It's about understanding how we see.
I've always loved how lifelike it all seems, even dramatic. So what were they doing differently?
Well, perspective was one of the big ones, pioneered by Brunelleschi, I think.
Brunelleschi.
Yeah, it was like turning a flat surface into a window, creating depth on a canvas.
Ah, so not just what you see, but how we see. What about chiaroscuro? It sounds more like a coffee order than an art term.
Right. But that's the use of light and shadow. Really masterful use, I should say.
It's what gives it that 3D feel, right?
Absolutely. It creates volume, makes the figures pop off the canvas. They were basically sculpting with light.
Didn't sfumato also help make things more realistic?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Leonardo da Vinci was a master of that technique. Sfumato, it means like smoked,
Smoked!
Yeah, in Italian. He'd blend the edges softly, creating these subtle transitions between light and dark.
So it looks more natural.
Yeah, exactly. Gives it that incredibly lifelike quality.
Speaking of Leonardo, he was like the poster child for the Renaissance man. Painter, inventor, scientist, anatomist. Did he ever sleep?
I doubt it.
Oh,
He embodies that Renaissance ideal of insatiable curiosity. His notebooks are legendary,
notebooks.
filled with sketches of flying machines, anatomical studies, all sorts of things. The guy was centuries ahead of his time.
I mean, the Mona Lisa is obviously iconic, but...
It's more than just a smile, right?
Right. It's that technique again, isn't it?
Yeah, the sfumato gives it that mysterious quality. And the Last Supper, it uses perspective in a revolutionary way.
You feel like you're right there at the table with them.
Yeah, exactly. And it's all designed to draw your eye to Christ at that crucial moment.
Powerful stuff. We can't forget Michelangelo, though, right? He was all about the grand, awe-inspiring stuff.
Oh, Michelangelo was a force of nature. His David, carved from a single block of marble, embodies that ideal of human perfection.
And the Sistine Chapel ceiling. Can you imagine?
Years of work lying on his back on scaffolding.
The creation of Adam is probably one of the most famous images ever.
It's iconic. But it wasn't just about technical skill for him. There's this raw power in his work. It often explored human struggle, divine inspiration.
He was very religious, wasn't he?
Deeply. But he also celebrated the beauty and potential of humanity. even the imperfections.
It's like he captured the whole spectrum of what it means to be human, reaching for something beyond ourselves. Then you've got Raphael, who seems to bring a totally different vibe to Renaissance art.
Oh yeah, Raphael is all about harmony and grace.
I can see that.
His figures are so elegant, and his paintings often depict these intellectual gatherings like the School of Athens.
The School of Athens.
Yeah, bringing together all the great minds of antiquity. It's like a visual representation of the Renaissance ideal.
Yeah, bringing together all that knowledge, a celebration of learning itself. But the Renaissance wasn't just about pretty pictures, right?
You're absolutely right. This era was all about challenging what people thought they knew and really looking at the world with fresh eyes. And that led
Like
to,
who?
well, some truly revolutionary discoveries in science.
Yeah, like Copernicus. He basically threw down the gauntlet to the church, didn't he?
His heliocentric model, putting the sun at the center, I mean,
Talk about a radical idea.
it was a huge departure from the church's view to suggest that the earth wasn't the center of everything.
Took some guts.
It did. His book De Revolutionibus Orbium Coelestium, published in 1543.
It must have caused quite a stir.
It did, and it really paved the way for other scientists to question the established order.
So that's like a turning point for science.
Absolutely. Copernicus started a debate that would change the course of astronomy. And then you've got Galileo, who picks up the torch.
Galileo. With his telescope, wasn't it?
Yeah, and he made all these observations. Jupiter's moons, the phases of Venus, even imperfections on the moon.
Imperfections. I thought everything in the heavens was supposed to be perfect.
Right. But his findings supported the heliocentric model and challenged that whole idea of perfect, unchanging heavens.
Didn't make him very popular with the church, did it?
Oh, not at all. His trial and house arrest in 1633, that really highlights the clash between the old ways of thinking and...
And the new scientific method.
Exactly. But despite the backlash, his work became so central to how we understand science today.
Observation, experimentation, that's his legacy. It makes you wonder, was anyone doing the same thing in medicine back then?
There was.
Yeah.
Andreas Vesalius, through his dissections and those incredibly detailed illustrations, he is
Changed how we saw the human body.
completely. His book, De Humani Corporis Fabrica, also published in 1543, what a year, corrected so many misconceptions about anatomy.
It's not just about new discoveries, but correcting the old stuff, too. Speaking of shaking things up, architecture went through a crazy transformation during the Renaissance.
Oh, yeah. Think about Brunelleschi's dome on the Florence Cathedral. I mean,
It's massive.
it is. And to build a dome that size without any external supports, using that herringbone brickwork, it's insane.
It must have seemed like magic at the time.
Talk about pushing the limits. And it's not just Brunelleschi. Leon Battista Alberti, he basically wrote the rule book for Renaissance architecture.
Rule book, really?
Well, his book, De Re Edificatoria, it emphasized harmony, proportion, the use of classical orders, like the Doric and Ionic columns.
Yeah, I remember those from art history class.
Right. But he wasn't just copying the Romans. He had a fresh perspective, a new way of applying those principles. You can see it in his Church of San Andrea in Mantua.
So it's Roman, but also totally new.
Yeah. This amazing blend of grandeur and innovative design. And then you've got Andrea Palladio, whose villas are still so influential today.
It's so elegant.
Palladio was a master of proportion and light. His 4 books of architecture became like the guide. His Villa Rotonda with that central dome and 4 identical facades.
It's like a perfect little architectural gem.
And that's the thing about Renaissance architecture. It's about finding that perfect balance
Balance.
between beauty and innovation, form and function.
They really nailed it, didn't they? It's not just in the buildings either.
Yeah,
That balance, you see it in their philosophy and literature, too.
absolutely. Take Niccolo Machiavelli, for instance. His book, The Prince, it's still so relevant today.
It is. He's a pretty controversial figure, though, isn't he?
Yeah, The Prince is basically a guide to leadership, but
It's not exactly warm and fuzzy.
no. It's about acquiring and maintaining power, even if you have to bend the rules a bit. Let's just say it's not your typical self-help book.
The ends justify the means, taken to a whole new level.
Machiavelli wrote, from his experience in Italian politics, a very turbulent world. And he argued that for a ruler,
Being effective was more important than being nice.
that's putting it mildly, he believed that effectiveness mattered more than being loved or even being morally perfect.
I can see why people still argue about his ideas today. And speaking of enduring figures, we can't talk about the Renaissance without talking about Shakespeare.
Oh, Shakespeare. His work just transcends time. Centuries later, people are still performing his plays, reading his sonnets.
It's crazy, right? Why do you think his work has lasted so long? Is it just the language, or is there something more?
I think it's his characters. They're relatable, even though they're from a completely different time and place. Shakespeare understood what it meant to be human.
He really captured the whole range of emotions, didn't he?
Absolutely. Love, loss, ambition, betrayal, everything. His characters grapple with these huge universal themes.
I mean, his tragedies, like Hamlet or Macbeth, they're pretty dark.
To be or not to be is a question that still resonates. He taps into our deepest fears and doubts.
And yet his comedies can be so lighthearted.
He had an amazing ability to find the humor in life, even in the midst of all the drama. A Midsummer Night's Dream is pure fun.
But there's always something deeper going on, too.
Oh, yeah. He makes you think. His language is part of it, too, isn't it?
Shakespeare basically invented, like, half the English language.
He definitely expanded it. It's
Yeah.
estimated that he introduced over 1,700 new words and phrases. He had a way with words.
He painted pictures with them. Wow, we've covered a lot. From humanism and art to science and architecture to Machiavelli and Shakespeare, it's mind-blowing how much happened during the Renaissance.
It really was a period of incredible change and creativity, a true rebirth. It makes you think about what we're overlooking today.
Yeah, what are the classics waiting to be rediscovered in our own time?
Exactly. It's something to ponder.
Definitely. Food for thought.
It really makes you wonder what those Renaissance thinkers would make of our world today.
Right, would they be like, wow, look how far we've come, or what have you done?
Probably a little of both. But I think that's the cool thing about their legacy. It keeps pushing us to do better, never settle.
Speaking of pushing boundaries, we were talking about architecture earlier. It seems like every historical period has its own style. What do you think defines Renaissance architecture?
Well, for me, it's that blend of beauty and practicality,
Yeah.
taking inspiration from the classics, but
But also pushing the limits.
yeah. Like Brunelleschi's dome, it's not just beautiful, it's a feat of engineering.
Totally. Like they're saying we respect the past, but we're not going to be stuck in it. And that innovative energy, it wasn't just in architecture, was it?
Nope, it was everywhere. In art, science, even philosophy and literature. Think about Machiavelli's The Prince, for example.
Oh, yeah, The Prince. It's a pretty intense read, even today.
It is, but it shows that willingness to challenge conventional thinking, even when it comes to like morality and leadership.
It's kind of scary how relevant his ideas still are. Makes you wonder if human nature ever really changes.
Maybe not as much as we like to think. But the Renaissance reminds us that we have to keep questioning those assumptions, even if they're uncomfortable, if we want to make progress.
And then there's Shakespeare, who seemed to just get human nature. Like he could see right into people's souls.
He really did. All those complex emotions, love, ambition, jealousy, he put it all out there.
His characters feel so real, even though they're from a totally different time. Why do you think that is?
Because he was dealing with universal themes, the stuff we all struggle with, no matter what century we live in. Loss, betrayal, the search for meaning.
It's like he had this magical ability to just look into people's hearts and translate that into words that still resonate with us. Do you have a favorite Shakespeare play?
Ooh, that's a tough one. There are so many amazing ones. Hamlet is definitely up there for me.
Yeah, Hamlet. Tragic, obviously, but so thought-provoking.
Right. It makes you think about revenge, the meaning of life, what it means to be human. That line, to be or not to be.
So powerful.
It's like he captures that existential dread we all feel sometimes. But it could also make you laugh.
Oh, yeah, his comedies are brilliant.
A Midsummer Night's Dream, for example, is just pure fun. All those fairies and love potions and mix-ups.
But there's always more to it than just laughs, isn't there?
Always. He sneaks in those little insights about love and illusion, makes you think.
And his language, I mean, come on.
He was a master. So many of the words and phrases we use every day, we owe them to Shakespeare.
It's estimated he came up with over 1,700 new words. He really did have a way with words. From the grandeur of Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel ceiling to the subtle beauty of Leonardo's Mona Lisa.
From Copernicus and Galileo's groundbreaking discoveries to the wisdom, or maybe cynicism, of Machiavelli.
And of course, the genius of Shakespeare, it's mind-blowing. The Renaissance was a period unlike any other.
It was. Where art, science, philosophy, literature, they all kind of blurred together. And out of that mix, all these new ideas were born.
It makes you think about what we could achieve today if we could break down those barriers between disciplines.
Right. What could we accomplish if we really collaborated?
That's a great point. But let's bring it back to our listener for a second. What do you hope they take away from this deep dive into the Renaissance?
I hope they walk away with a sense of awe, a real appreciation for what humans are capable of when we set our minds to it.
It's inspiring.
The Renaissance was a time of huge upheaval, but it also produced some of the most incredible works of art, literature, science that we still admire today.
It shows you what we can achieve even when things are tough. We're pretty resilient when you think about it.
We are. And I hope our listener feels inspired to tap into their own creativity, to embrace that Renaissance spirit of curiosity and innovation.
I love that. It's like be your own Renaissance person.
Exactly. Whether it's art or science or something else entirely, find what excites you and go for it.
That's a great message. But before we wrap up, there's one more thing I wanted to touch on. We've been talking about the Renaissance as this amazing transformative period, but
It wasn't perfect, right?
exactly. What about its limitations? We have to acknowledge those too, don't we?
We do. It's important to remember that the Renaissance was a product of its time. For all its achievements, it was still a period of huge inequality.
And while they talked about human potential, it was often a very narrow view of who counted as human.
You're right. Women, marginalized groups, they were largely excluded from this vision of progress.
It's a good reminder that history is complicated, and we should be careful about romanticizing the past.
Absolutely. But even with those limitations, I think the Renaissance still has a lot to teach us.
Like what?
It reminds us how important it is to keep questioning what we think we know, to embrace creativity, to keep learning and growing.
Those are pretty timeless values, aren't they?
They are. And they can help us deal with the challenges and opportunities we face today, just like they helped people navigate their world back then.
So it's a call to action, in a way.
It is. To be the best versions of ourselves, to create a better world for everyone.
It's pretty amazing to think we can still learn from them all these centuries later.
Right. And apply those lessons to our own lives today. I mean, we might not be painting masterpieces or
We're launching telescopes into space.
Exactly. But we can all find ways to tap into that spirit.
Be our own little Renaissance person. You've given our listener a lot to chew on today. We've gone from the rise of humanism and all that amazing art,
To those groundbreaking scientific discoveries and architectural marvels.
and even dived into Machiavelli and Shakespeare. It's been quite a journey. But if there's one thing you want our listener to take away from all this, what would it be?
That's a good question. I think it's important to remember that the Renaissance wasn't just about going back to the old ways. It was about taking those ideas and,
And making them something new.
yeah, something bold, something that challenged the way people thought. They pushed the boundaries of knowledge and creativity.
It's like they were saying, we respect the past, but we're not going to be limited by it. Pretty cool, huh?
I think so. And that's something we can all learn from. It doesn't matter what you're passionate about.
Art, science, whatever.
Exactly. We can all draw inspiration from the past, from other cultures, even from other fields of study, and use that to create something new and exciting.
It's all about making those connections, seeing where they lead you. Who knows? Maybe our listener will be inspired to write a poem or pick up a paintbrush.
Or maybe they'll finally read that book about quantum physics they've been putting off.
Right. Or maybe they'll just look at the world a little differently with a little more curiosity and a willingness to ask questions.
Yeah, that's the real legacy of the Renaissance, isn't it? That belief in human potential and the power of our own curiosity. It's about using our creativity and critical thinking skills to make the world a better place.
It's inspiring, isn't it, to think that we can all make a difference, just like those Renaissance artists, scientists, and thinkers did back then.
Absolutely. We all have that potential within us. We just have to tap into it.
Well said. It's been fantastic exploring the Renaissance with you today. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and helping us connect all these dots.
Oh, it was my pleasure. I always love diving into history and seeing how those ideas still resonate with us today.
And to our amazing listener, thanks for coming along with us on this deep dive into the Renaissance. We hope you've learned a thing or two and maybe even feel a little bit inspired to embrace your own inner Renaissance spirit.
Keep exploring, keep learning, and keep asking those big questions. There's a whole world out there waiting to be discovered.
That's a wrap on our Renaissance adventure.